The call came in as a domestic disturbance, but it ended with a sickening thud on concrete. That sound wasn't just a tragedy for a teenage girl. It was the precise moment my future ceased to exist. The call came in as a domestic disturbance. That's the code for anything from a shouting match over the TV remote to something that ends with chalk outlines on the carpet. You never know what you're rolling up on. My partner Dave had the kind of casual cynicism that only 20 years on the force can bake into a man. He saw every call as a potential fight, every civilian as a potential suspect. Me, I was 2 years in, still green enough to believe I could actually help people, still stupid enough to think every situation could be de-escalated with a calm voice and a little respect. We pulled up to a modest 2-story house in the sleepy part of town, the kind of street where the biggest crime is usually someone leaving their trash cans out a day too long. A woman was on the front porch, wringing her hands, her face a mask of frustration. Standing defiantly on the lawn was a young girl. Couldn't have been more than 15 or 16. She had headphones around her neck and her arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was trying to hold herself together. "She won't listen to a word I say," the mother yelled as we got out of the car. Sneaking out, talking back, I'm at my wits' end with her. Dave sighed, the sound of a man who'd heard this same story 1,000 times. "All right, ma'am, let's all just calm down." He walked towards the girl, his posture immediately confrontational. "You, what's your name?" The girl, Maya, glared at him from under her brow. "Why?" "Because I asked," Dave shot back, his voice already tight. "We're here because your mother called. Now you're going to show us some respect and go inside." I tried to step in, play the good cop. "Hey, let's just take a breath," I said, directing it at everyone. "Ma'am, what exactly happened?" But Dave was on a roll. He and the girl were locked in a war of wills. He took a step closer, puffing out his chest. I saw the fear flicker in her eyes, quickly replaced by that stubborn teenage pride. It's a volatile combination. She said something under her breath. I didn't catch it, but Dave did. "What did you just say to me?" he growled, getting right in her face. "I said, 'Get out of my face, pig,'" she spat, louder this time, and that was it. That was the switch. Dave reached for her arm, and that's when my own training, my own panic, kicked in. The protocol is to create distance, establish control. I moved between them, trying to put myself in the middle, my hands up in a passive gesture. "Okay, everyone back up. Now." But Maya wasn't backing up. She tried to shove past me, to get back to her mother on the porch. Her shoulder connected with my chest. It wasn't a real attack, more of a panicked scramble. But in that split second, with Dave yelling and the mother screaming, my instincts took over from my brain. It was a stupid, reflexive action. A shove. Not a punch, not a strike with my baton, but a hard, two-handed shove to her chest. It was meant to create space, to re-establish control. But she was all sharp angles and teenage awkwardness, already off balance. She went down like a sack of bricks. There was a sickening, wet thud as the back of her head met the concrete curb. The world went silent. The shouting stopped. The traffic noise faded away. All I could hear was the blood pounding in my ears. Maya was on the ground, completely still. A dark, glistening patch began to spread out from under her head onto the pale gray sidewalk. Her mother let out a scream that I don't think I'll ever forget. It was a sound that clawed its way out of the deepest part of a parent's soul. My body went cold. "Oh my God," I whispered, staring at my hands. The hands that had just done that. Dave was already on his radio, his voice strained and clipped. "Officer involved. Medical required immediately. Send a bus." I couldn't move. I was a statue of pure, uncut panic. My career, my life, it was all flashing before my eyes, except it wasn't flashing, it was just over. Everything was over. The next few minutes were a blur of sirens, but not the familiar ones. These sounded different, more urgent, more important. Then a black sedan, sleek and official, pulled up and screeched to a halt. It wasn't a standard patrol car. The doors opened and out stepped a man who made my blood freeze solid in my veins. It was Chief Reynolds. He never ever came to scenes like this. He was a man of press conferences and city hall meetings, not domestic disputes on suburban lawns. He didn't run. He walked with a calm, deliberate pace, his eyes sweeping over the scene. The hysterical mother, Dave trying to keep her back, the paramedics now working frantically on the still form of the young girl on the ground. And then his eyes found me. They were like chips of obsidian, hard and unreadable. He walked directly toward me, his face a granite mask of controlled fury. My bladder, my legs, my lungs, every part of me screamed to run, to collapse, to cease to exist. Time seemed to warp, stretching each of his footsteps into an eternity of judgment. And as he stopped just a few feet away, his shadow swallowing me whole, a sudden searing heat flooded my groin, a warmth that had nothing to do with the cold night air, and everything to do with the absolute soul-crushing terror that had just taken over my body. The smell of my own urine was sharp and acrid in the cold air, a private, pathetic humiliation that felt as loud as the mother's ongoing screams. Chief Reynolds' gaze dropped for a fraction of a second, down to the dark, spreading stain on my uniform trousers, and then back up to my eyes. He didn't smirk. He didn't say a word about it. The absolute lack of reaction was 1,000 times worse than any insult he could have hurled. It was a dismissal. I wasn't just a screw-up. I was a pathetic creature not even worthy of his contempt. "Report," he said. His voice was unnaturally calm, a low rumble that cut through the chaos around us. It wasn't a request. It was a command that bypassed every chain of command and lodged itself directly in my spine. Dave tried to step forward, to take the lead, to control the narrative. "Chief, the suspect was non-compliant, became aggressive." Reynolds held up a single hand, palm out, without ever breaking eye contact with me. Dave's mouth snapped shut. It was like watching someone turn off a radio. The chief's entire universe at that moment consisted of only two people, him and me. "I asked you, officer," he repeated, his voice dropping even lower. "From the moment you stepped out of your vehicle, tell me everything." My mouth felt like it was full of sand. I tried to form words, to string together the official-sounding phrases from the academy. We arrived on scene, responded to a domestic. The mother was on the porch. The daughter, Maya, was on the lawn." I was stammering, my voice cracking. I could feel the eyes of the other cops, the paramedics, the neighbors peering from their windows, all burning into me. "She was verbally non-compliant," I managed, the words tasting like ash. My partner engaged. I attempted to de-escalate, to create a barrier. "Create a barrier," Reynolds repeated, the words flat and dead. He wasn't asking. He was dissecting my lie. "And how did you create a barrier?" She moved towards me, pushed into me. It was reflexive. "I used an open palm technique to create space, sir, to regain control of the situation." I was just spewing jargon, a desperate attempt to wrap my catastrophic failure in the sterile language of procedure. Behind the chief I saw them load Maya onto a gurney. She was so small. A brace was around her neck, and her face was pale and slack under the flashing red and blue lights. They slid her into the back of the ambulance. The doors closed with a final, heavy thud. The ambulance pulled away from the curb slowly, its lights flashing silently, painting the street in horrifying strokes of red and blue. No siren. Every cop knows what it means when the ambulance leaves without a siren. They're either stable, or there's no point in rushing. Looking at the scene, I knew which one it was. "You created space," the chief said, his voice pulling me back from the brink of total dissociation. "You, a 200-pound man in body armor, created space from a 90-pound teenage girl. And that space ended with her skull hitting that curb." He gestured with his chin towards the dark, wet spot on the sidewalk. "You see, officer, what I see is a girl lying in a pool of her own blood. And you, standing here, having pissed yourself like a terrified child." The words hit me harder than any physical blow. The heat of shame was so intense, I thought I might actually pass out. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was more terrifying than any shout. "You think this is about a bad shove? You think this is an internal affairs investigation and some desk duty? "You sweet stupid boy." He shook his head slowly, a pitiless smirk finally touching the corner of his mouth. "You just walked onto the biggest landmine in this entire city and jumped up and down on it with both feet." I could only stare, confused. A landmine? What was he talking about? It was a horrible, tragic accident, a career-ending mistake, but he was talking like I had just assassinated a world leader. He saw the incomprehension on my face. He let the silence stretch out, letting the weight of my failure, my fear, and my shame press down on me until I could barely breathe. He glanced at the disappearing taillights of the ambulance, then his dark, cold eyes locked back onto mine. "That little girl you just put in an ambulance," he said, his voice barely audible but carrying the weight of a death sentence. "Her name isn't just Maya. It's Maya Miller. Her father is Judge Franklin Miller." The name hit the air and hung there like a toxic cloud. Judge Franklin Miller. Not just any judge. The presiding criminal court judge for the entire county. The man who had sent more people to prison than anyone else in the state. The man who had, just 6 months prior, publicly crucified the department during an inquiry into excessive force. He was a pillar of the community, a political heavyweight, and more importantly, a black man who had made it his personal crusade to hold law enforcement accountable. And I had just put his daughter into the back of a silent ambulance. My bladder wasn't the only thing that had given out. My entire future had just voided itself onto the pavement. Chief Reynolds took a step back, his expression shifting from cold fury to something I couldn't quite read. It was a calculating look, the kind a chess master gives the board when he sees a path to victory 10 moves ahead. "So here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice now crisp and businesslike. "Dave, you're going to take this officer back to the precinct. You will place him in interview room 3. You will not read him his rights. You will not book him. You will sit with him, and you will both wait for me. Understood?" Dave, who had been standing frozen this whole time, just nodded, his face pale. "Yes, Chief." The ride back to the station was the longest 10 minutes of my life. The shame of the wet spot on my pants, which had now grown cold, was nothing compared to the roaring inferno of panic in my chest. I wasn't just fired. I was going to be a symbol, a poster boy for everything Judge Miller had been railing against. I was going to be offered up as a sacrifice to appease a powerful man and a hungry media. In interview room 3, the silence was deafening. The cinder-block walls seemed to close in on me. Dave just sat across the table, staring at his hands, refusing to meet my eyes. He was cutting me loose. I was radioactive, and he was getting as far away as he could. An hour later, the door opened and Chief Reynolds walked in. He didn't bring a lawyer. He didn't bring an IA detective. He brought 2 things: a fresh pair of uniform trousers and a resignation form. He tossed both on the table in front of me. "The girl, Maya, has a severe concussion and a fractured skull," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "She's in surgery. The doctors are optimistic, but it's serious. Her father is on his way to the hospital now. Before he gets there, I need to have a story." My head was spinning. A story. "Your partner, Dave," the chief said, nodding towards him, "is going to write in his report that he was the one who engaged the girl. That in the chaos she tripped and fell backwards, hitting her head. A tragic, unfortunate accident during a lawful intervention." I stared at him, then at Dave. Dave's face was a mask of grim relief. He was getting a pass. He was being handed the out. "And me?" I whispered. "You?" Reynolds let out a short, humorless laugh. "You were never here. According to the official record, you called in sick today. Food poisoning. You resigned from the force this afternoon for personal reasons, effective immediately. You'll sign this form, which I have already backdated. You'll go home, you'll pack a bag, and you will get the hell out of my city. You will never work in law enforcement again. You will never speak of this night to anyone. In return for your complete and total disappearance, the Miller family will never hear your name, and you will not be charged with aggravated assault on a minor. It wasn't a choice, it was a command." He was bearing me to save the department from a war with Judge Miller. He was trading my career for political peace. Dave, the cynical, aggressive veteran who instigated the whole thing, would walk away clean. I, the idiot who made the catastrophic mistake, would simply cease to exist. My hand was shaking as I reached for the pen. I looked at the resignation form. It was a simple, sterile document, but it felt like a death warrant. This job, being a cop, it was all I ever wanted to be. In my stupid, naive way, I really had believed I could make a difference. Now, I was a ghost, a dirty secret stuffed in a file cabinet. I signed my name. Chief Reynolds snatched the paper off the table. He pushed the clean trousers towards me. "Get changed. Your service weapon is on my desk. I'll escort you to your car. You have 1 hour to be across the county line." As I walked out of the precinct for the last time, a disgraced man in a borrowed uniform, I saw the news playing on the TV in the lobby. A reporter was standing outside the hospital. The headline read, "Judge's daughter injured during domestic call." The story they were spinning was already taking shape. A story of a chaotic scene, an accidental fall. A story with no villain, just a victim. A story that didn't have my name, or my face, or the stench of my fear anywhere near it. I had been erased, and as I drove out of town, watching the city lights shrink in my rearview mirror, I knew that the silence from that ambulance wasn't just for Maya Miller. It was for me, too. My career hadn't just ended. It had never even happened.